Hello, everyone. This is Rona Palmer from eMain Enterprises, and thanks for joining us today for this month's Best Practices webinar. And a quick point of clarification for, as you may know, eMaint being a CMMS provider or software provider does a variety of webinars, including product demos and other kinds of product training, but our Best Practices series focus on strategies for maintenance and facilities leader to really make better informed business decisions. And so this is not a training session, but we have those listed on our website. So toward that end, I'm really pleased to have joining with me today Alana Dunoff, who's an adjunct professor at Temple University's Facility Management Program, and she's going to be presenting today's topic, Smart Metrics That Make a Difference. And Alana, thanks for being with us today and kind of for putting this together. And maybe you can tell us, Alana, it's not often that we have someone from a university program that deals with our industry present a topic. And maybe you can share, you've been in this field for so long. What is it about recent trends that you've seen that wanted you to put together this topic, and why is it important?
Let's see. So first off, good morning to everyone as you're all kind of getting in there. I think that, first off, I do wear two hats. I am an adjunct professor, but I also still have a consulting practice, and I think that I'm continuing to try to find ways to marry what I learn in the field and how I can teach it to students to train them to go out and be facilities professionals. And this issue of around data and information, particularly for this new generation, they're all about data. They're all about computers and technology, and wanting to help them understand how to use data and information to their advantage. And so in some of the classes that I teach, I'm really trying to get them to think about information in ways that allows them to be smart about data, to do research, and how do you make a decision? We make our best decisions based on data that we collect and research. And so I think that's a big focus that I see, and I've always liked talking about data and information. I just think it's fascinating because there's so many facets to it.
Excellent. Well, I know this is a topic that should resonate with our users as well, because the CMMS does allow you to collect a lot of data, right? But sometimes it can get overwhelming. What do you do with it? So we appreciate it. Just before I turn things over to Alana to present today's topic, a few quick housekeeping items. We are recording today's session, and we'll share it with all the attendees at the conclusion of the webinar or later today, so that you might share it with others. Alana has also allowed us to take her slides and share a PDF with those who are interested in her slide deck. So at the end of today's webinar, you'll get a survey will appear on your screen when we end the webinar, and just check a box saying you'd like to receive a copy of the PDF, and we're happy to do that. And lastly, Alana has agreed to stay through the hour and answer any questions that you might have at the conclusion of her slide deck, but please feel free to type them at any point into the questions feature at GoToWebinar, and then I'll read them to Alana, who will get to as many as she can, time permitting, before the end of the hour. So without that, over to you, Alana, and the main event.
Thank you, and welcome again to everybody. I'm really excited. I'm putting this topic together about sort of measuring what matters. And so I am really excited that eMain has joined me today, and you'll see I tried to kind of weave some of them into this conversation as well. I thought I would take a couple minutes to introduce myself. So just so you know the perspective that I'm coming from, as Rona said, I am an adjunct, and I've been an adjunct for over 13 years. Most recently at Temple University, I helped start their facilities management program, and it's really great fun to be with the students and engage kind of a whole new generation. But I actually also have my master's in facilities planning and management, and so I've been a practicing professional for about 24 years. And I really consider myself a strategic facilities planner. So I also kind of have that client component that I like to bring to my conversations and my presentations. So one of the things I want to share with you real quickly too is that I do, when I speak, tend to have a couple of different hats. So I have my professor, I want you to learn something hat, but I also have my consulting professional hat, and I do try to kind of like to bring those two things together, so you'll see me kind of go back and forth from those from time to time. The other thing I want to sort of be right out there and tell you is that it turns out I'm a bit of a data geek. I never wanted to truly admit that, but I really do like information, and I've learned over the years that more and more that everything comes back to good information and having good data. And without that, the decisions you make are never as good. And so I've really been speaking on this topic in various shapes and forms for a number of years. And then the other thing I want to sort of mention to you about me is that I really like process. I like thinking about getting from point A to point B in as few steps as possible. I'm always wanting to be more efficient. And so what I'm hoping to do today is just sort of marry those two things, marry the idea of data and process together. There is a lot of data everywhere these days if you haven't really noticed, right? Big data, lots of numbers, dozens of metrics and information kind of swirling around us. I don't know about you, but I do remember those days when we didn't have enough data even around us. And when we did, that data was in a paper format or process. And, you know, it wasn't for years until we had graduates having some of our information in Excel spreadsheets or Lotus documents. I think I remember those too. And even back then, our data wasn't consistent and it wasn't reliable. And we didn't know anything about KPIs and metrics. But now we have tools like CMMS systems and integrated work management systems that have really been critical to how we run our FM maintenance and operations departments. And in many cases, in addition to our CMMS systems, we have building automation systems, building management systems, and energy management systems, and occupancy sensors, and meter readings, and a whole list of software and technologies that go far above and beyond anything we've done. And all of this data is supposed to help us manage and operate our facilities, make them safe for our people, make our people more productive. Yet there are times when it can be completely overwhelming. And to that point, there are days when I kind of long for a piece of paper rather than sort of staring at my screen. Data collection and tracking systems we're supposed to simplify our lives, right? All the information in one place, help us making better decisions. But it can also be kind of exhausting. So perhaps it's not really that we have too much information. It's that we need to figure out how to do a better job of filtering out what we actually need. I love this quote by a gentleman by the name of Clay Shirky. He's a writer and a teacher, and he talks about the social and economic effects of internet technology. So it's not maybe information overload, but maybe it's filter failure. Maybe we're not filtering the information properly. So what if we could actually reframe the issue, this challenge of too much data and information, to realize that what we really need is a better filter system, a better process to help us manage our data. And, you know, for a better filter system, since I know I'm talking to FM and operations people, a filter, that's a language we understand, right? A problem that we can actually figure out how to solve. I can figure out how to solve and create a better filter system. So what I want to do today is, again, I want to talk about my love for data and this idea of process. We've already started to talk about the challenge about having too much data to analyze and collect and how we kind of struggle around it to help us make good decisions. So my objective today is to provide you with a few new tools and processes to rethink how you collect, manage, and analyze data, sort of streamlining, your processes. I want to see if we can figure out how to filter and reduce the noise of all that information and data that we have so that we can focus our efforts better on having that data help us make, better decisions, better everyday decisions. So I'd like to offer what I think a rather simple process and solution that starts with the basic foundation of understanding, your organization and who they are and what they value. So we're going to focus on mission, vision, and culture. We're going to spend some time talking about good, smart data and the 4 core values of an organization. So here we go. What is measured is valued. This is actually probably one of my favorite ideas. I say this all the time. My students are always like, okay, we get it, we get it. But it's such a simple idea, and maybe the biggest concept that if you leave with nothing else today, that you've scribbled this one down for yourself. What is measured is value. We measure the things that we care about. You know, so like if you were looking to lose a couple pounds, you might possibly measure yourself by stepping on a scale because you care about the outcome and you use the scale as a measure to help you know you get to where you're going. So when you step on the scale sort of week after week, month after month, you're measuring your progress. It's a very simple, easy metric. The little dial tells you exactly what it is. It's a quick piece of information and data that helps you stay focused on your goal, of losing a couple pounds. And we can take this idea just even a little bit further with the idea that when we measure things, it also helps us define our success and also helps us identify our challenges. And all you have to do is think of a report card to get that point, right? So a report card is a great measure that allows us to see our successes and our opportunities for improvements. So like the report card you see on your screen, you know, it shows that we're stellar in some areas like reading and art and music, but perhaps in gym, you know, that's clearly not where our best effort is, and we need to do a little bit more work in our mathematics selection as well. So a report card, a scorecard, allows us to measure, to see where our successes are, and to see where our opportunities for improvement are. So what I want to suggest to you is that we can think of a solution that helps you filter out what you don't need, helps you measure what's really important to you, and helps you define successes and opportunities. I hope that sounds good to you, because that's where we're headed. And we're actually going to start off, just so I have a little bit of idea of kind of who you are, with a very basic poll question, and Rona's going to help us with this. What I want to know is, do you know, off the top of your head, do you know your organization's mission and vision statement? And no fair cheating and going to the website and seeing if you can look at it real quick. But I'm just real curious if you know your organization's mission and vision statement. And we'll let that polling process begin.
Okay, thanks. So I've called up the poll, and just a simple yes, no. Do you know your organization's mission and vision statement? And full disclosure, I had this, Alana shared that with me, and I realized, you know, there's no wrong answer here, trust me, because I ended up not answering this a yes. Shame on me. But great. All right, it looks like we have about 80% of the people voting, so let's leave it open a few more seconds. And okay, so let me share the results here. So, Alana, actually this is interesting. 62% have said yes, they do know their organization's mission and vision statement. And then 38% of us said, no, we might have an idea, but we really don't know our organization's mission. So,
all right, that's pretty good. I should have asked you to all rattle your organization statements and mission statements off to me. Then we'd really know if you know them. But actually, I'm so glad to hear that, because that's really the first step in this whole process. Step one is know your organization's mission, vision, values, and culture. And if you don't know, for that 38% of you who aren't sure, you know, try your company's website and go into the About section. Typically, that's where the mission and vision and cultures section is, and it describes it. And sometimes they're on the back of business cards. Sometimes it's a catchphrase that happens within your organization. But my big ask for you today as part of this whole conversation is for you to find it, and if you don't know it, print it out perhaps and hang it on your desk. And even if you do know it, I still want you to print it out and have it at your desk, because knowing your organization's mission and vision statement is going to be the key really to everything else we're going to talk about today. Mission and vision, quite frankly, are often overlooked and even ignored in a lot of organizations. They're sometimes really just seen as kind of words on the website or on the company letterhead, and we kind of forget why they're there and what their purpose really is. But at one point, a whole bunch of people, sat in a room in your organization to craft that mission statement, to set the focus and the intention and passion and the goal for the organization and company. So mission and vision are the core of what our companies believe in and what they hope to achieve. They tell us why we do what we do, what we hope to achieve. How do our organizations define success, and how do we create a unity of purpose of all of us marching to the same beat and the same drum? And our mission and vision statements talk about what we care about, which is why they are such an important part of this process, because this is about what we care about, measuring what we care about. So I'm going to put my professor hat on for a second and just make sure that everyone on the call with us today is clear about some of the terminology that I'm going to talk through a little bit. So I just want to make sure we explain what mission and vision, what I mean when I say those terms. So a mission statement is really often described as a statement that defines what's the benefit to our customers. What are we trying to be? What are we trying to give to the outside world in the universe? We want customer excellence in whatever we're doing. Who do we want to be? What do we want the world to see from us and what we're doing? A vision statement, on the other hand, tends to be sort of the ultimate goal. It's sort of the thing that we'll never quite reach because there's always more that we can do. So when we see vision statements, they often say things like, we're going to be best in class or world class, always driving, always pushing to be the industry leader or something much bigger. And not every organization has a mission and a vision statement. Sometimes it's one that's kind of mushed together, and that's okay. It's just words and terms. But the idea is they all still help the outside world and the internal world of our organizations know where we are headed. Other things our organizations have are things like values. And there's also value statements that are often defined and crafted within our organizations. And these things are about, they judge our behavior, about who we are as people, how we make decisions, what our priorities are as an organization. These might be things about integrity and adaptability, and that we're innovative, and that we know the things that make us feel good about being in that company. And then the final thing that we often see in sort of this whole kind of area of mission and vision statements is culture, or sometimes called corporate culture. And corporate culture is the character of our organization, kind of what it feels like to be in that organization. How do things get done? What's it feel like to work in that place? Is it a fun organization? Is it a conservative organization? All of that is part of culture. So why should you care about mission? Because, again, sometimes they're just words and sentences written, a long time ago that nobody really cares about. Do they really have value to us? I think you should care because understanding what your organization cares about, I think directly translates into what you should be caring about within your FM or maintenance departments. I would argue that it's actually our job to understand our organization. We're supposed to care about what our organization does because that's how we do our job. That's how we support our organization in everything they do to make people productive and safe. We have to know what they are, and we have to care about what they care about. So if your organization cares about it, we should be caring about it too. I would even go far as to say, and for that percentage of you who did know your organization's mission statement, I challenge you to take it one step further and create your own departmental mission statement, something that clearly aligns with the organization, that gives your FM, your maintenance department, a real focus. It also can help strengthen that filtering process by knowing exactly what you're doing because you are so aligned with your organization. So for those of you who do know your mission statement, I challenge you to go ahead and craft your own department mission statement. It's actually a great department exercise for you to get your staff together and say, what is it we're trying to do? Who are we trying to serve? What do we care about as the FM or operations department? So I've got a bunch of examples that I'm going to share with you as I kind of illustrate these. I'm not going to read these all through because that would take far too long and all day. But I want to point out some great things about some of these mission and vision statements. So this one's for a company called PolyOne. At PolyOne, our vision is to be the world's premier provider, right? That's the vision statement. World premier. It's an ultimate goal. That's something to always to realize. But then they have four sort of components that define that even further. So specialization, where they have knowledge and innovative solutions. Globalization, where they're talking about expanding in growth markets and being a global resource. Commercial excellence, where they're talking about value and driving to the end solutions. And then operational excellence, the idea of continuous improvement in all aspects of their business. That's one. The second one is Cintas. And I don't know if any of these companies are on the call here, so I hope you like, if you are, I hope you like seeing yourself up on the screen. But Cintas helps businesses of all kinds and sizes get ready for the workday. And what I love about Cintas's statement here is I love their corporate culture statement. They say that it's the single most important distinguishing factor between greatness and mediocrity. They see corporate culture, who they are as an organization, as their competitive advantage, according to their founder. That's really a big idea, that who they are is a part of their competition. But they also then identify three additional elements and principles. So they have a principal objective about exceeding our customers' expectations. There's that customer piece again. Their corporate character, that they're professional, that they have high ethics and moral values, but also a sense of competition and competitiveness. And then they have a system, a management system of policies and procedures. Okay, next up, I see I threw maintenance in here. And I had to ask Rona for the mission statement, and she said it helping organizations around the globe implement world-class maintenance. And actually, I might even argue that this might be a vision statement because it's such a big idea, right? World-class maintenance operations making their clients better. And again, I love their culture statement about driving customer success and providing the best support they can. But they also talk about their environment, that it's a fun place to work, and they believe in that whole adage of work hard and play hard. I think that's a really important a notion about who they are as a company and an organization. All right, I have two more to go here to drive my point home. The next one is a company called PJM Interconnection. They're here based in the Philadelphia area, and they happen to be one of my clients. And I'm going to show you some resources and data from them later, so I thought I would throw them in there. So their vision is to be the electric industry leader. They're responsible for the wholesale markets and also the whole electric grid for about 62 million people. So their mission is about safety, reliability, and security of that electrical power system. There's nothing more important to them than that particular line of their mission statement. But they also care about their markets because they run the energy market, they care about their customers, and they also care about their people, the superior knowledge of their workers and technological advances. And then the last one I want to share with you is Vanguard. They're a mutual fund company also located here in the Philadelphia area. And their mission statement is actually quite short. It says, you know, take a stand for all investors to treat them fairly and give them the best chance for investment success. But the reason why I wanted to share this one with you is because I know that organization well enough, and I know that their facilities organization actually crafted their own purpose statement. So to my point before about encouraging you to think about crafting your own mission statement, they did that. They created what they called a purpose statement that says to provide a great work environment that enables and motivates our crew to best serve all its investors. Crew is their staff, but you can see how these two align with each other, and that this simple statement is a marching order, a call to the facilities organization to be focused on what they need to do. So what I'm curious about is if you've noticed any common themes here. You know, those are all really different companies, but did you notice common ideas, common terms, common thoughts and processes? I saw lots of things like customer excellence and success, continuous improvement, superior knowledge, global reach and markets, systems, policies, morale and values, fun. We saw fun, and we also saw competitiveness. These are the values that our organizations care about. These are the things we know they care about, and so how do we figure out how to take these kinds of things that they care about and figure out how to measure them and how to bring value? So I would suggest that we can actually take those ideas and think about them in sort of in 4 different what they call perspectives or categories or buckets of what organizations really care about. They care about 4 primary things. They care about customers, like who we serve, and we saw that with terms like customer excellence and success. We care about finances, right? We care about how we make money in our organizations, how we make it, how we spend it, how we earn it, how we give it, perhaps even how we donate it, right? So this is about global reach and competitiveness and markets, right? Those are some of the terms that we saw in those other mission statements. Organizations also care about processes, how we get things done. And here's where we saw terms like continuous improvement and a system of policies and processes. And then finally, organizations care about their people. Who's getting the work done, how it's getting done, right? And here's where we saw terms like superior knowledge and moral values and a fun environment. So then I wonder, can we actually measure these values, these customers, the finance, the process, and the people? And I will acknowledge that not every organization, and those of you who know your own mission statements or perhaps are starting to look at it now, might say, well, I don't see all 4 of these in my company's mission statement. And that might be true. They're not always of equal in perspective and value. But I will still suggest that can we measure these values? And I would say, without a doubt, we really can measure these values. And part of our process that we're going to talk about today is how we can do that. So we're going to move forward with this idea in mind. So which takes me to our next polling question, actually our last polling question, I guess, where I would like you to think about, looking at your own organization's mission. So if you know it or you've looked it up in the time that we have talked about it, do you, get a quick sort of yes or no, does this resonate with you? Are you seeing those kind of 4 perspectives of the customer, finance, process, and people within your own mission and vision statement? So I'll let you, Rona, run with that one.
Okay, we've opened up the poll question. Again, do you see these values in your organization's mission statement? And these are just done collectively, not individually, so no wrong answer here. All right. Alana, promise you won't be grading anybody after the conclusion.
I'm not anybody, I promise.
Okay, it looks like we've gotten about 70% of the votes in. Give it a few more seconds while people are thinking about this, and then we'll share the results so you can with our group here.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and do that. So, Alana, it looks like, well, we're close to the 80-20 here, but it looks like 79% have said yes, they do see those values in their organization's mission statement. 21% said no, they do not.
Okay. All right. I'll take that. I think that's pretty good. And for those of you who don't, perhaps there's some additional verbiage within your organization, and like I said, not every organization has a robust mission statement. Perhaps you have a value statement or something else that might give you some direction. But I'm glad that many of you do, and it looks like I'm on the right path here as we kind of take you through this idea and process. So what I'm actually going to ask you to do is kind of hold on to those ideas for a couple of minutes, sort of put them to the side, because I'm going to switch gears for a couple of minutes and talk a little bit about data, because I've talked a little bit about process and organization, and now I've got to talk about data because I'm a data geek. So what I want to do is first, when I talk about data, is I'm always kind of compelled to just make sure I give my little speech on the importance of good data, and that I sort of set the stage. Every time I talk about data, and I could actually spend an entire session just talking about this slide, perhaps, which may or may not be so interesting to everybody. But everything we're going to talk about going forward assumes that we have good data. So when I say the term good data, what I really mean, and what I'm hoping that you have come to know and understand, is that good data needs to be valid and reliable. It needs to come from a trustworthy source that's repetitive and that you can use over and over again. That how that data is collected is a clear methodology, again, with clear parameters of how it's collected over and over again. And that the age of your data also can also be important as part of your process. I've seen people use benchmarking data from years past, and you can't use, if you use too old data, it can skew your decision-making process. Data needs to be relevant, which is one of the hardest things because it takes a long time sometimes to collect data, and you want to make sure it's comparable to where you are today. Data should also be really simple to obtain and simple to understand. You shouldn't have to do like a whole lot of math to get to where you want to be. There shouldn't be a lot of division and added factors and a whole lot of complicated Excel formula tables to get to where you want. We need to figure out how to keep it a little bit more simple. And of course, that old adage of garbage in and garbage out also very much relates to data. What we get out is only as good as the kind of information and the consistency of information that we put in. And again, I could spend a long time talking about this, but I wanted to at least kind of make sure I got my piece out about good data. And another aspect of data that I want to share is this idea of smart data or smart metrics. So the word smart, it's not only about having intelligent data that helps make decisions, but someone cleverly, and I probably should know this, figured out that the term smart could also be an acronym. So we see the SMART goals. I remember years ago I worked for a company and we had SMART goals as part of the professional development process. And we can use that same concept for smart data or smart metrics. And really what it means and what that acronym kind of breaks down to is the idea that all of our information, all of our data should be the following. It should be specific, right? Represent a single element, a single definable piece of information. Our data or our metrics should also be measurable. We need to be able to compare our data, our metrics, to other data, to other information. So it needs to be something we can easily measure. It also needs to be achievable. It should be easy to obtain that information within a relatively, easy collection of process. Our data should also be relevant and measure what we need it to measure. If we are going to be looking at energy utilization, we should be looking at the appropriate and relevant measure, like a kilowatts per hour, or using like an EUI or an energy utilization index, if we're going to be using a comparable measure or metric. And then the T in SMART stands for time-bound. And this is about duration or the period of time, a month, a year, a week, a process that we can compare so that we have something to compare to. Historic comparing of data, looking from, 1 week to the next week or 1 quarter to the next quarter or year from year, is a great way to think about and use data. So all of these 5 characteristics kind of come together to be SMART, right? And what I like about the idea of smart data is that it's kind of a nice checks and balances, so that if you're not sure about the data or metrics you're collecting, ask yourself, does it meet these 5 categories? It's like a little checklist. Is it specific? Is it measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound? And if it's not, get rid of it for now. You can always figure out how to do things later, but keep it smart and keep it simple. Because I am a little bit of a data geek and a little bit passionate, I have one more topic I want to talk about as it revolves around this idea of data and smart data. And that is, I want to suggest to you that perhaps the reason why we're so overwhelmed with so much data is because there are literally, hundreds and thousands of possible metrics and data points we actually could be tracking. And just like so many other things that we tend to do, we've sort of supersized our metrics and data collection process. We're trying to collect so much information because we can, and it's not really helping us. So it goes back to this idea of filtering things out. And I want to suggest to you the power of one piece of data. That one piece of data, one metric, might be all you need to measure value. Again, the idea of filtering out what we actually need. What if one piece of data or one metric could actually help you tell a story or explain a circumstance? And by way of example, I'm going to talk about napkins. Right? Why not? So this story has got a couple years to it, but it's a great story. I think it's really relevant, and of course, will hopefully prove my point. I'm sure all of you remember Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. And if you've ever been to New Orleans has this wonderful cafe called Café Du Monde. They are home to the most delicious powdery sugar-covered beignets. And beignets, if you don't know, they're a type of donut. And the more powdered sugar on these donuts, quite frankly, the better. But the more powdered sugar you need, also the more napkins you need to clean up the mess all over yourself. So Café Du Monde buys lots and lots of napkins, tens of thousands of cases of napkins. So this graph that you see on the screen here shows the cases of napkins that Café Du Monde was purchasing before Hurricane Katrina and then after. So then that by about 2008, over about 2.5 years after that devastating hurricane, the cafe was buying napkins at numbers that reflected the pre-hurricane purchasing. I love this story. I think the story that this tells is that if Café Du Monde was buying a lot more napkins again, it means a lot more people were buying beignets. And if a lot more people were buying beignets, then perhaps the region was really starting to recover, that people were coming back to New Orleans and back to the cafe. One piece of data, information about napkins, tells a powerful story about the recovery of this great city. That's such a good story. I have one more example that I want to share with you around the power of one data around contingency variance analysis. So here, this idea is around the idea that I was talking to a project manager friend of mine, and he was saying that he has a client doing this multi-million-dollar project, and he only asks him for one piece of data at the end of every week. He only wants the contingency variance analysis. And the reason why he only wants that is because he says the budget has already been spent. It's a multi-million-dollar project, but the contingency variance, if that shifts from week to week, if that starts to decrease, then he knows that there's a problem. If the variance stays the same or only changes slightly, then he's not so worried. And of course, he gets more concerned on that contingency variance number depending on how far along the project is. So again, the power of one piece of data. Okay, so we've talked about understanding your organization's mission and vision. We've talked about the 4 values of our customers, finance, process, and people. We've talked about smart data and the power of one. So now we're going to try to bring it all together. So wish me luck here, and we'll bring it together in the last bit of time we have. All right, hang on. Flip a page here. So here we are back to our 4 perspectives. And since we know that for the most part, these 4 perspectives encompass the core values of our companies, and again, some of you may not see all of them. Maybe you just only talk about customers or just talk about process or something like that. But what if for each of these values we could actually define an objective or a goal that we could measure? So for the customer perspective, we could measure improving customer satisfaction. For the financial measure, we could look at reducing operational expenses, for instance. For processes, we could have an objective around maybe increasing our sustainability efforts. And what if the objective for our people would be to maybe increase training hours, to give them more professional development? So let's take these examples, these objectives, and see if we can actually create some measures and metrics around them. So measuring our customers. Again, that objective was to improve customer satisfaction. So what is that metric and target? And I'm just kind of pulling these out as some suggestions and some ideas, but one way to measure improving customer satisfaction would be to be looking at some kind of positive feedback on a work order service request. So say we want a metric or a target of 85% positive feedback. And our method of getting that data, of collecting that data, might be using our e-maintenance email survey, after a work order request has been sent out. And we send that out after the work has been done, and we ask people, how did we do? And there's lots of different methods we can do, and we can talk about lots of different ways we can collect information about our customers. We can do pre- and post-occupancy evaluations and surveys and questionnaires and so on. But if we were just going to send that email out, perhaps there's an email that looks something like this, right? You get somebody completes their work order. How does your work order go? Please complete this short survey. Tell us about, was your request completed on schedule? Was it completed accurately? Was the staff who did the work professional? Was I overall satisfied? And this request survey is a yes or no format, but you could also use 1 through 5 ranking or something like that to get some more data. But you could send this out. You could send it out every time there's a work order request, maybe a corrective maintenance, people calling in for issues and problems. And over time, you start to collect and see if people really are satisfied with the work you're doing to get you to that 85% metric or the 85% goal. The next one is about measuring our finances. And that objective was to track and reduce operational expenses. So the metric here was about, I'm going to suggest, how about a 5% decrease within the year of the operational expenses? Maybe we'll look at sort of a budget to actual. And so here the methods might be looking at benchmarking data and looking at current and historical costs. But again, there's lots of ways we can use and collect information around our finances. We can do cost comparisons and service level agreements and earned value analysis and even those contingency variances as ways, as possible objectives and metrics that we could be using. So this example has a variety of different methods kind of going on here. It's a spreadsheet. It's really kind of like a dashboard that looks at janitorial and maintenance and maintenance operational expenses. And I start off with a column of information that looks at the external world. For my building and my building type, what are people paying for janitorial costs or for maintenance costs? So I kind of have a benchmark of where to look at. And then I start collecting data, just basic cost data, perhaps on a month-to-date. The GSF is gross square footage. I start collecting that information on a monthly basis, perhaps on a yearly basis. And then I also have last year's information on there as a way to benchmark internally about how I'm doing so that I can create some variances. And the way a spreadsheet like this works is I'm able to look at it and I can say, gee, there's some areas I'm not doing so well. There's the areas in red. There's areas that are yellow that I'm kind of concerned about, but perhaps there's something going on, and everything else is doing well. But this kind of information and data, really simple, not a lot to necessarily collect on a regular basis, would help me support my metric and my goal. The next one is about measuring our processes. So this one we said about increasing sustainability efforts. And there's lots of things we can do to increase sustainability efforts. Again, what if our metric or target was a minimum of 5% decline in energy and water consumption? And here a method might be using a baseline of utility consumption information and perhaps even measuring the impact of new systems and processes. Other things you could do might be looking at work orders. Perhaps you really care about safety in your organization, so that's where you should be looking at processes around safety. Or maybe it's about work order systems and you want to understand your preventative versus your corrective maintenance, another great objective around measuring our processes. So this is the organization PGM I had mentioned before. This was a very extensive spreadsheet we compiled looking at consumption and costs. And we looked at it over a couple of different years, actually 3 years. And in between some of those years, we were starting to renovate some of the buildings. And so we wanted to see what consumption and costs were before and then after those renovations. So here's a quick graphic, a very simple graphic taking that information that did indeed show a decline in energy consumption. And we could clearly pinpoint that the effects of some of the renovations they were doing, like putting in psyllium lighting and some other new systems, really helped to decrease electrical consumption, or at least have it remain sort of status quo. But when we were looking at water consumption, here we weren't actually so lucky. We pulled this data together and we saw a big spike in water consumption despite putting in waterless urinals and low flush valve toilets and some other things. And so when I showed this information to the facilities organization, what they realized was that there was a reverse osmosis system that was dumping water in these buildings. And so by showing this data, this little bit of bad news, they were actually able to go correct it and eventually get this rectified, so there's no longer this kind of increase in consumption. It was really a mechanical error that was causing it. And then the last one, again, is about measuring our people. And here we suggested increasing training hours. So here now we're talking about more than 40 hours of, the metric is making sure that our people are trained at least 40 hours per person. So that's as simple as tracking the number of hours of training we're giving our people, making sure they're getting the training that we think that they need to be real knowledge workers within our organization. And this is just a sample, kind of reiterates that same thing. Our measure, our goal is staffing hours, and we want to see those increase over a period of time. So what I want to show you now, though, actually, let me step back for a second. So if step one was knowing your organization's mission, vision, and values, and you're going to print it out and hang it at your desk. And step two was to identify 1 to 2 objectives for each of the perspectives, and then for each objective, define a metric like we just did. And that one piece of data could be actually pretty important here. Then what I want to suggest is putting it all together in step 3. And step 3, I just love this. I love how this all comes together in the simplest of forms and charts, where you see all 4 of the perspectives along the one column. You see each objective associated with that, and then each of the metrics or targets associated with that particular objective you're trying to achieve. And then there is a time frequency. In this case, there's a quarterly frequency that's noted here. And you just start to put in your data. And I just love how this kind of brings all of it together. It brings the organization, the alignment of the organization and the mission, along with the objectives and things we care about in facilities, and making sure these are the things we focus our time on and that are getting done. And notice that these metrics are all SMART, right? They're all specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So with the customer and the improving the customer satisfaction, 85% positive feedback is our target. Quarter one, the first quarter we got about 79%. The second quarter we got to 81%. I don't know what quarter 3 is going to be, but we're hoping it's moving in the right direction. If it's not moving in the direction, we have an opportunity to figure out why, what's going on, what's happening in our processes. So the interesting thing about this whole concept, and perhaps some of you are familiar with it, is that technically this is actually what is known as a balanced scorecard dashboard. But that's a very complicated term and truthfully isn't so necessary. But what I like about this concept is that it's a scorecard, right? Just like the report card I talked about earlier that measures performance, this is about measuring what's important to the entire organization and putting it into a simple dashboard format, a one-page document that makes it easy to track, monitor, and report our data. It's also called a balanced scorecard because you have to work in balance with all of the 4 perspectives. Because sometimes they can be in conflict. Like, for instance, the objective to reduce operational expenses could be in direct conflict with that objective to increase training. If I have to increase training, that's going to cost me some extra dollars. So they have to stay in balance. So then when we see all of these things together, all of the things that we care about in our organization together, it helps us prioritize. It helps us make decisions. It helps us look at the balance of the entire organization. So my final thoughts here as I'm quickly running out of time. Challenge of overwhelming data, I think, is self-imposed. We need to be thinking about creating a filter. Know what your organization cares about. And if you do know what your organization cares about, think about what you care about within your own FM and operational organizations. Don't forget your to-dos here, right? Print out that company mission statement. Consider crafting your own mission statement. And again, think about defining objectives and metrics for each of those perspectives within that balanced scorecard. Another thing I want to mention is the idea that you really are your best resources for what you should be measuring. You do know your organizations. Use your mission statement and the organization's vision and all of those documents as a way to help you align and filter out what's really important to your organization. Keep those metrics simple and smart. I could probably spend a whole another hour talking about bad news data, but the thing I want to say to you here, for you just to think about as we wrap up, is that when you have bad data, like bad news, where you see something not going in the direction you want it to, that look at that as an opportunity for continuous improvement. All data is an opportunity for good, and in facilities and operations, great opportunities for continuous improvement. And finally, share your data and tell your story. I think data should be shared. So when you create your simple balanced scorecard or your simple dashboard spreadsheet, and keep it simple, just a couple pieces of data, 1, 2 pieces of data, I encourage you to share it with your management, with your staff, and your colleagues. Let it help demonstrate the value that you individually bring to your entire organization. And that is how you measure, or a possible way of how you measure your value. So that wraps up my content. I know we have a couple of minutes left, and I would love to take any questions or thoughts anyone has. Like, does this resonate with you? Good idea. What do you got for me?
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Alana. So again, anyone that has a question, Alana's agreed to stay for a few more minutes and answer them, so please just type them in the questions feature in GoToWebinar. One that came in during your presentation, Alana, was, do you have any tips on getting senior leadership to trust the data that you present? And this particular challenge is, if I'm interpreting their question correctly, it's that they're, as much as they trust their own intuition or their own internal belief system more than the data that they're showing from their CMMS or elsewhere. Maybe you've had some experience in overcoming that?
Yeah, I'd like to say that, good data should drive all the decisions. My initial thing that comes to mind is to spend a little time with that senior manager to understand what's important to them and what they value, and see if you can understand how they make decisions and what they care about, like what's their vision, like what do they care about, and perhaps you can craft the data to fit their vision and their world. When we use, I like to believe that, facts are facts and data is data, and they should tell a compelling story. But I will say that if we sometimes give too much information to our senior managers, it's too much for them. Perhaps even try the 1 or 2 piece data approach, like the example of the contingency variance. Maybe this guy only needs 1 or 2 pieces of information, and he's too overwhelmed by so much information that he doesn't, he's sort of unfocused anymore and filtering out the noise. So maybe it's about understanding his value. It's a tough one because I like to believe that that people actually believe in data, but maybe figuring out what's important to him first and building a case around that.
Gotcha. And on a similar vein, we hear so often from our customers that the data that comes out of a CMMS is really only helpful if the data is being put in consistently, and sometimes you need to overcome some fear, and have you had, how do you kind of get even, not necessarily only management, but even people within your staff to embrace metrics and data collection and tracking that information? How does that get to be perceived as a benefit for them rather than a fear.
So do we have an hour? So I think part of it is that place where I said about bad news. People do not like collecting data and doing it because they're afraid it's going to show that they're not performing well and that something is wrong and that therefore they're going to get in trouble. But if we can reframe that conversation and say, actually, whatever we learn is good. Because whatever we learn, we're going to be it's either going swimmingly well and we're not going to worry about it, or there's a problem and we're going to fix it, and then we're going to change the process and we're going to figure out what's going wrong, and then we're going to show you that it's been changed and that we have value. So some people get worried about it from that standpoint. I also think there's a whole training component about inputting data, about collecting data that gets to be that isn't done well enough, so things aren't put in consistently. And that's the nice thing about drop-down menus these days, where you get to sort of pick and click and have things be consistent. But I will also say this issue about too much data. I think that people go, oh, it's so much to collect. Stop collecting 50 pieces of data. Collect 4. Collect 5. Collect the things that are really meaningful. This whole idea about trying to filter out all the noise is about breaking it down. Forget everything you've done before. Find the 4, 5, 6, even 10 things that are most important to your organization, and just for the next, 6 months or a couple quarters, collect only that data. Then perhaps you'll get everybody a little bit more on board because it doesn't feel so enormous, filtering out the data and the noise.
Great. And one last question that came in, I think we have time for it, was one of our listeners was asking, could you just maybe give a few examples that people can cherry pick from to get started, on a suite of metrics that you've seen, perhaps I know we have people that are in FM and commercial. We also have many in an industrial sector. So maybe just a few examples of some metrics that you've seen to be a good place to start with tracking. And this is in a commercial setting, by the way, the specific individual who asked it.
So, trying to think about how to best answer that without knowing your organization. I mean, the argument that I'd like to suggest is that finding those metrics around each one of those perspectives. So, one of the most important things in any setting is our customers. And when I say our customers, I'm talking about our internal staff, the people who call us and have cold calls and all of the issues that they have. So to my mind, customer satisfaction is absolutely one of the most important things. Are we meeting their expectations? And defining what those are. So customer satisfaction is absolute key. Processes, is a hard one because there are a lot of different lots of processes. I like the preventative maintenance to corrective maintenance metric. I just think that that's a great one that helps our internal FM staff as well as looks at the overall organization, because we say, well, look, what's that goal? And I think a lot of metrics I've seen has been wanting to get to 80% preventive maintenance to 20% corrective maintenance, which is a huge goal all by itself. So that's a good metric. Training, the people one is also a little bit more challenging. I like training. I like credentials. I like encouraging those kinds of things to do. The finance one, that really depends on your organization and what you're responsible for. Again, it could be cost oriented for operational costs. It could be budgets. It could be variance. I'm not sure I'm probably not answering you fully there, but a great resource might be your industry may have benchmarks. So what's your industry talking about? So IFMA, for instance, has some terrific benchmarking reports that talk about custodial cleaning, and that those are things that people are measuring. So custodial, costs and maintenance costs perhaps are the two areas that people a lot of benchmarking. Don't try to benchmark sustainability. No one's doing a very good job about it yet. But operational costs like custodial and maintenance are good ones, particularly if they're a robust part of your organization. I hope that answered your question. I feel like I could probably spend an hour pulling all of that out.
And one more I'll just add, just from that our customers say have been helpful to them, is on-time completion of critical work. So if it's, and I guess, people define critical differently, whether it's safety or, compliance. But if it's critical, what percentage of those are getting completed on time, along with the ratios that Alana mentioned? Well, I know we could go on for days, but you are right that we're at the top of the hour. And again, Alana, thank you so much for putting this together and really giving a very helpful, actionable, all within an hour that I hope our users can take away. I know I've learned a lot, so we very much appreciate it. And thanks to our listeners for taking time out. And the only other assignment I might ask is when I conclude the webinar, please give us your feedback. Our goal, again, is to really make these presentations have topics that really deliver value to you and answer questions that, you need answered that will help you do your jobs better. So, again, thank you, Elena, and thank you to our listeners. And that concludes today's webinar, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you again to all the listeners, and feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn or via email, my website. So questions, thoughts, ideas, I'm happy to hear them. So again, thank you very much for your time today. Have a great rest of your summer.
Great. Signing off. Take care.